Good evening, guys. Frank Macaluso here from Garageaholic, and today we're going to be covering wiring. We're not going to be doing the beef of the wiring today, which is most of it. We're actually going to be doing a quick lessons learned, a quick tutorial on how to read wiring diagrams, how to read wiring schematics, and how to interpret them for an engine swap. I'm going to use an example of the electronic cooling fan for the N54 and adapting that to work for the E36. So I'll show you as an example how to read the wiring diagrams, how to take them, how to splice the wires. We're going to end up hooking power, we're going to be hooking the signal wire, and we're going to be learning about how to read schematics, both the new ones for the WDS and also the old ones for the E36, the old PDFs that you guys are probably familiar with. So we're going to end up going through that. I'm really excited to show you guys how to do this. I'm going to be as detailed as I possibly can, and hopefully you guys learn something. All right, so stay tuned. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the wiring for the fan. This is the connector for the fan. I scavenged it from the E92, and it's got 8-gauge wire, battery and negative right here, and then there's a very small, thin, looks like a 18-gauge wire. That's what's going to be used for the signal. This comes directly from the DME to command the fan to turn on at whatever speed that it wants based on the temperature of the coolant sensor on the engine. So that's how they cool the fan on the N54. So let me explain to you how I'm going to route the wiring to install and adapt to the E36. All right, plugs right into there. I'm going to snake this wire around. This 8-gauge wire is going to connect to this wiring bundle that I had made up here. This is about 4 feet of wire, and it's got the positive, the negative, and the signal as well. So that's going to kind of snake around there just like that. And then it's going to end up going to a relay. The CAS unit here, when this turns on, it's going to turn on this wire. Let me see if I can find it. It's green, so it's pretty easy to find. Right here. This is a wake-up wire. It's green wire. It's small, and it is actually going to provide the 12 volts to turn that relay on. So that relay will remain off whenever the car is off, which is a good safety. I didn't have to wire this directly to a relay, but it's good practice and safe operation to do so. So the CAS unit is going to control the relay. This is the X6001 connector, and I've extracted the wire already from it. This right here is your E-fan wire, okay? This is a black wire with a blue stripe. It matches the black wire and a blue stripe that's coming out of the fan. So it's the same exact wire. It's just I'm just reconnecting it from the X6001 connector on the DME back to the fan. So the DME is going to end up sending a 5-volt pulse width modulated signal to the fan. The fan's going to end up getting its power whenever the car is on through the wake up from the CAS. So they're going to all play together. I'm going to wire up as much as I possibly can, but this is the general theory on how to wire it. I will show you later on in the video how to actually look up this information on the wiring diagrams for both the WDS wiring diagrams on the N54 as well as the wiring on the E36. I don't really need the E36 wiring for this actually. So all N54 wiring. The E36 is only for positive and ground. Okay? So let's go and do that wiring right now. Let's crimp our connectors. Let's extend this wire and let's just get everything in the general vicinity, including the relay. All right, let's just cut the time lapse for a sec. I want to show you what I'm doing. This is a heat shrink crimp. Basically what you do is you crimp on either side, put them together, butt connectors, and you after you get them both connected, then you use heat and you heat shrink them, and it kind of makes these a little bit more transparent, and it also heat shrinks it as well. So there's a little glue in there, and it kind of keeps it all weather packed. So I'm going to show you how I do this. This guy kind of slips right into there, and then you use your crimpers, and you just make sure you have it on the right half. Right? Not too far in, not too far out, just perfectly right in the middle. And then you crimp. And then when you're done, you have a really nice lip there, if you can see it. Let me see if I can focus, maybe. There's a really nice lip there, and neither of them move. This is a master appliance. It's a, I forgot what the number is, but it's basically just like a little butane lighter. It's pretty slick, kind of just click like that. You got your fire, and you just kind of just nicely and easily and then we just wrap it up with electrical tape, and then we put a little bit of loom over it, and we're good to go. This is a 87A, which will be a normally open relay, meaning that when you command power through the 85 and 86 pins, 85 will be coming from the CAS unit, 86 will be going to ground, then you command that relay and it turns the fan on, basically clicks it from an 87A to 87, which basically closes the high amperage contacts. 87 will be connected to the positive going to the fan. And 30 will be your constant power supplied from the battery. So it'll be coming from the B+ terminal directly to that 30 pin on the relay. So I'm going to be installing the relay down here. Okay, I'm going to be using a self-tapping screw, and I'm just going to screw it in there, and I'm going to wire it up as such. All right, that is the plan moving forward. A quick review of the connectors that are going to be going to the relay. Now remember, we have pin 85 and 86. 85 will be coming from the CAS unit. That will be the signal power going to the relay. 86 will be going directly to ground. So I've rigged up a low gauge wire that's going to go into the relay, and it's going to go to ground. Okay? Then you have 87. Remember, 87A is going to be open, but 87 is going to be going to the fan. This guy here is going to be going directly to the fan. And then finally, 30 is going to be the power coming from the battery. So that'll be basically coming from the B+ terminal. And I've rigged up a guy right here for that. And this guy is going to be coming from the terminal directly to the relay. Now let's use our 3/8 split loom. Do the trick I was telling you earlier in the other video about the electrical tape to hold it in place. Let's get this loomed up, and then I'll explain to you exactly what everything looks like over there, and we should be done with wiring. I did get it all clamped in, okay? Now, the relay is hooked up, it's in there. Remember, the relay has 4 hookups. Power going right here to the B+ terminal. So we can get a better look at that. There we go. B+ terminal, it's still loose, but it needs to be hooked up. It has power, low voltage or low amperage power. This is my going to the CAS unit, which is this guy right here. So I gotta connect these two. All right, the CAS unit will end up waking up the relay, which will turn power on to the fan. It'll have ground. The ground is right here. All right. Okay, I have ground. And then of course the fan goes there, and the fan is also grounded right here. So everything should be a good continuity. This is actually an E36 ground lug, so I'm good there too. And our blue wire coming directly from the harness, as explained earlier, is going to go directly into the X6001 connector. It is a black wire with a blue stripe, and it is going into pin 8. So yes, pin 8 on the CAS unit, pin 8 on the X6001. And that is how we will end up turning our fan on and off through the E36 wiring. Alright, so for the wiring diagrams, you have essentially 2 different types of wiring diagrams. The old type, which are the PDFs. This is the E36, which is one of the last body styles that they ended up doing PDF wiring diagrams. It's actually pretty easy to look this up. This version is searchable, so you can actually do a Control F and look for things like splices and connector reference designators and things like that. This document actually comes through, if you start going through it, it gives you like a whole index of all of the sensors and computers and things like that that are part of the entire car assembly. And then it goes into talking about what everything means. I mean, if you read through some of this, you'll understand. You're talking about things like the battery, the heating element, what speakers look like, what splices look like, what a relay or a switch looks like, how to understand the wire gauges and colors of the wiring, and going into relay labeling because of all the different types of relays and switches that are being used in all these applications, goes into all that. So if you read through a lot of this, it'll show you exactly what you'd end up what you'll expect as you go through and read these schematics. Wiring schematics are very, very easy, and I don't mean to oversimplify it, but all it is a wire going from point A to point B. It's carrying either power or ground, or it's carrying some sort of a signal, whether it's a discrete signal like a voltage, or it's a CAN signal like two twisted CAN wires. Older cars don't really have much CAN. I think they really started to introduce it in the mid 90s, but the late 90s and on had much more depth of CAN, and that is documented on the newer wiring diagrams, which is a whole new world. It's a blessing and a curse. It's more of a blessing, but here is called the IMPA W and WinKP tool, and this is where you can go into what's called the WDS wiring diagrams. You click on this, you find your model. In this case, we're talking about an E92. And it goes into this menu here that you see, and the menu goes through the left side, has all the information about the vehicle. It has all the information about all the E92. So as you break it down into the drive, you start going into the actual motor electronics. When you're talking about things like engine wiring harnesses, this is the most important for most engine swaps, is to understand where the pinouts are on the DME, on the powers and grounds, and the other connectors that end up going to the body. Very, very important. So as you go through the left side menu here, you'll see you're looking for the right engine that you want, and you kind of have to read it because it's oddly worded, N54 engine or N43 engine or this or that. So if it applies to the engine that you were dealing with, which is N54, you can expand that, and it brings you all the way down to all of the components of the engine. Okay, it gives you the general. Anytime you see this little insignia here, it talks about all of the information. It gives you like an instruction of how the engine works. You can read through all this to truly understand about how the engine works inside and out. But then you can also go into the wiring diagrams. Here you can see how it's been broken up into exhaust system, misfire detection, engine speed manager, and it goes all of this stuff, right? Let's just say, in our case, with the fan, we want to try to go to what's called engine cooling, right? So here we are at engine cooling. Expand that, and then you see this little insignia, right? And actually kind of goes in, indented a little bit more information here. The engine cooling, talk about N54 up to 2007. No, we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with a 2010. So we want to find N54 engine as of 2007. So filtered by N54 as of 2007 up to 2009. Very, very narrow search there, but that's not what we're looking for. Here it is, N54 engine as of 2007, right? Or September of 2007. So you click on that, and then the right side comes up with the actual wiring diagrams. So you can actually take this right here, and these actually split the windows, whether you want all that or half and half, or you can remove that and actually you can make it any size you want, and it exposes the wiring diagrams. So continuing on with the example of the coolant fan and how to wire up the coolant fan, we want to zoom in. It's kind of a clunky interface, but because you can't use the scroll wheel, so you have to use the actual buttons. You'll see here that we're dealing with, in this case, we're dealing with the 600 watt fan, right? So we're dealing with a 600 watt fan. How is that fan connected? And I remember when we were doing the build, we're dealing with a positive wire, a negative wire, and then the signal wire, the PWM signal, your pulse width modulation signal that's coming out of the DME. Pin 8 SW/BL. SW is I don't know what it means in German for black, but it means black, and then BL is blue in German. So SWBL is black wire with a blue stripe. Going into pin 8 of, where is it going into? if you scroll all the way to the right, you'll see that this is part, because there's a dotted line here, it's part of a connector. And that connector is X6001, which is the exact same connector that I've been talking about this whole time that interfaces with the car. So this will end up being interfacing with the car. Okay, so you scroll up and you're saying, where does that go? Well, if you have a 600 watt electric fan or 400 watt. In this case, the N54 that we're dealing with on the 335 Xi has a 600 watt fan. So you can see that that wire stops here and connects right here and goes into pin 4 of the electric fan. So it's a 3-pin, it's actually a 4-pin electric fan, but one of the pins, pin 3, is not being used here. So you're dealing with a motor and then your pulse width modulation that's provided by the DME in order to control the speed of the fan. Now, this diagram does not go into detail as to how that speed is calculated, but it actually is calculated from the engine temperature sensor, which is a 2-wire sensor coming right off the radiator. So as the temperature of the engine increases, the DME takes that calculation, performs an algorithm, and it increases the pulse width for the electric fan signal for the PWM, and the fan ends up spinning faster as a result. So continuing on up through the power supply for the fan, you'll see that this here says it's a 6.0. That means it's 6 square millimeters. That's the gauge of the wire, which in AWG or American wire gauge turns out to be 10 gauge wire. So this guy is a brown wire, BR is brown, and this guy going into pin 2 is the red RT with a blue stripes. That's also a 6 millimeter squared wire. So these two wires, pin 1 and 2, are the two big twisted pair wires that I end up going to the relay, which here is a characterization of said relay. Okay, so we have a thin wire going in for the PWM. We have our 2 thick wires going into the electric fan for the actual power. And that up here is the top of the diagram shows the powers. So the powers here end up going into pin 1 and 3 on the relay, or as I like to say, pin 85 and pin 30. And then you have pin 86, which is your low gauge wire going to ground, and then your pin 87, which is your high gauge wire going into the actual electric fan. So that's why they have a relay here. If you trace this all the way up into what's called the junction box, you'll find it's called A4010. If you click on that, which is a clickable icon, you'll see the left side of the screen change, and it brings you right to that junction box. Now let's go into that a little bit more, right? So we want the junction box as of 2007, right? We talked about the years already. So you click on that, and the new wiring diagram for the junction box comes in. You want to zoom in on that. Okay? Now we're dealing with F28. It's a fuse, okay? All right? So if you zoom in here, and go down a little bit, you'll see F28 is right here, okay? And F28 goes through a relay that is actually IO1069. This relay gets its signal from somewhere, and we need to figure out where that signal is coming from, because that ultimately turns the relay on for the fan. So it's a low gauge wire that turns a sense wire on the relay. Let's click on F28 again, or F28, and you can see here F28 corresponds to this, right? So you click in here, and you'll see that F28 corresponds to IO1069, as we talked about earlier. I know I might lose some of you here, but the point that I'm trying to make here is that this IO1069, if I scroll up here, right? IO1069 controls F28, which is for the fan, right? IO1069 controls that, so we need to find out what controls IO1069. Okay, so clicking on F28, what controls that relay? It is up here, right? It looks like it's the car access system. This is what I was talking about earlier, pin 8 on the car access system. It's a green wire, which I explained earlier. It actually provides the power. It's an output, okay? It's an output. This is a power output, 12 volts, low amperage, because it's a 0.35 millimeters squared, so it's a low amperage wire. Provides power to this relay. It closes this relay to fuse F28. Keep F28 in the back of your mind. Now let's go back to the engine cooling. Okay, zoom in. power to F28 is provided through this relay, which then actually turns the power onto the fan. Okay, so we're actually just going to use one relay because that's just going to be our only single wake-up relay, which is why I decided to use the cast pin 8 to turn the relay on, and that actually turns the fan on, which controls the fan. So that just about does it for understanding how the wiring diagram works. I can go into more detail upon request, but that is how we will be moving forward with wiring up our electric fan. Guys, thanks a lot for watching. I hope you learned something about how to wire up a car. This is, again, an introductory tutorial as to how to read schematics, how to interpret the wiring, and how to apply it for your swapped car, no matter what it is. So, teaching a guy how to fish can't provide the fish. You got to learn how to do this yourself if you want to get good. I'm not the best. I'm not even good. I just think that I'm just a DIYer. So I think you guys can do this if I can, and I hope that you do. Good luck. And thanks for watching. Tune in for the next video where we go through all the rest of this wiring in a shit ton more detail.